one double-stranded DNA divides, keeps dividing, and in 50, 60 replications, it becomes 100 trillion cells, which is more than all the stars in the Milky Way galaxy. So all the cells in your body, whether it's a brain or heart cell, they contain the original primordial stem cell from where you became yourself. But this is only the short part of the story. In addition to these 100 trillion cells in our body, we have about 10 times more cells that are bacteria. So although the bacterial mass is only about 5% of your body weight, the bacterial DNA is about 10 times more than your human DNA. This bacterial colony is called the microbiome, and it's everywhere. It's everywhere in your body, in your heart cells, in your kidney cells, but mostly in your skin, in your orifices, and in your GI tract. So stomach, intestine, so on. Now it turns out that the microbiome also makes the same molecules that your brain makes when you're experiencing emotions or thought. Okay, thought, feelings, emotions, memories, desires, imagination, creativity, intuition, insight, inspiration, anything that happens in consciousness is not only registered in the brain and transferred to the rest of the body, but your microbiome makes the same chemicals. I would suggest that you should trust your gut feelings more than your brain, because your gut cells haven't yet learned how to doubt their thinking. Okay, the brain cells have become too intellectual. So this is now true of all our body. So when you say my heart is full of love or resentment or hostility, you have molecules that represent those states. Okay, so where's the mind? It's everywhere. It's not in your brain. It just happens to speak in English with an Indian accent in the brain. Okay? In the brain, it happens to be verbal. It thinks it's very smart, makes logical decisions, linear logic, etc. But your body is holistic. It doesn't think in linear terms. It doesn't even think in cause-effect terms. It doesn't think in terms of right and wrong terms. It's holistic, it's relational, it doesn't have a win-lose orientation, and your body is part of an ecosystem, and it's regulated by a process. And for lack of a better word, that process is indeed the mind. So what is the mind? The mind is a relational and embodied process. Relational, because we only have mind in terms of relationship. Right now, my mind is speaking to your mind. Okay? It's a relational process, and it's also embodied, because as I'm speaking to you right now, what is happening is certain neuropeptides are being triggered in your frontal cortex, which is, the rational part of your brain, which is saying, what the heck is he saying? That part of your brain is being triggered, and then there are the release of these chemicals, and your whole body is getting this information. So you cannot squeeze your mind into the volume of a body or the span of a lifetime. The mind extends outside the body and the mind. It's part of the ecosystem. Now with technology, it becomes very apparent. So I can send an emoticon to somebody in South Africa, and I can give them a dopamine hit. Okay, or I can send a rude message to somebody in China and raise their blood pressure and cortisol and adrenaline. Wherever the mind goes, the body follows, and the molecules follow, information follows, and energy follows. Therefore, the mind is an embodied and relational process that regulates the flow of energy and information in the ecosystem of life. That's what the mind is. So likewise, your body is an activity, because in every moment of your life, your body is this river of energy and information that's in dynamic exchange with all the elements and forces of the universe. How? through breathing, through eating, digestion, metabolism, elimination, how we experience the world through our five senses, and then our inner world of thoughts, feelings, emotions, memories, desires, imagination, creativity, insight, intuition, inspiration, choice. All of that is influencing what's happening in the body. So even with one breath that you breathe in, and I'm taking only one activity after I've mentioned all these, even with one breath that you breathe in 10 to the power of 22 atoms from the physical universe. These 10 to the power of 22 means 10 followed by 22 zeros. And these go everywhere in your body. With every breath that you breathe out 10 to the power of 22 atoms that come from everywhere in your body. In just the last 3 weeks, a quadrillion atoms have gone to your body. Quadrillion means 10 followed by 15 zeros that have gone through the body of every other living species on this planet. So think of a tree in Africa, a peasant in China, a squirrel in Siberia. You have stuff in your body that was circulating there 3 weeks ago. In less than 1 year, you replace 98% of all the atoms in your body. So at the molecular and atomic level, you recycle your stomach lining every 5 days, your skin once a month, your bones, your skeleton, which seems so hard and solid, but it's calcium, phosphorus, a few other elements that you could buy in a hardware store for less than $5. And your skeleton is recycling every 3 months. So in 1 year, you've recycled your entire body down to the last atom. So this body, which I'm using right now to give you this lecture, is my year 2015 model. And the last time I came to Miami, I brought the same suitcase, but not the same physical body. So this raises some very interesting philosophical and now scientific questions. Who are you? What is your true identity? If you say my true identity is my physical body, then which is part of a universe, which is a living system. In fact, the atom, every year you've had a new body since you were a baby. So let's go a little deeper. I said, you're both a mind and a body, and these are both processes. The mind is a process, an embodied and relational process that's regulating the flow of energy and information. And now we know that E is equal to mc squared, so energy, information, and matter are the same thing in different forms. Where's all this stuff coming from? This is the most important thing. So you say, in spiritual traditions, we say there's a body, there's a physical world, there's a mind, but there's also something called the soul. Scientists do not like those terms. Even with mind, they're uncomfortable, because how do you measure the mind? How do you measure a thought? How do you measure an emotion? Now we can to some extent, because the physical representation of mind is the body. So we can measure the representation of the mind in the body. But when you say soul, then there's a problem. Here's where we can explore it scientifically. Awareness. We are fundamentally a field of awareness. And in that awareness, we have experience. And the experience is life. We have a core consciousness, which is just a field of awareness. But in that awareness, we have experiences, and the subjective experiences we call our mind, and the objective experiences we call our body and the experience of the physical world. But experiences are already happening in the field of awareness. And as we probe deeply into the nature of awareness, it seems that awareness is not in space and time. That awareness is the fundamental ground of experience that permeates the cosmos from the level of atoms to the level of galaxies. Now this is controversial, so you don't have to take my word for it, but there's a lot of debate now on two things. What is the universe made of? And why is it such an open question? Well, it's an open question because the deeper we look into the stuff of the universe, we realize there's no stuff. 70% of the universe is mysterious dark energy, which we don't know what it is. It's expanding the universe faster than the speed of light. 25% is dark matter, which leaves only 4 to 5% of the universe, which is atomic. The rest, we don't have any idea because it's not atomic, so we can't interact with it. So the visible universe, which is all the stars in the Milky Way galaxy, all the other galaxies, hundreds and billions of stars and trillions of planetary systems, is 0.01% of what exists out there. 0.01. And here's where we get into problems. Atoms are particles. Particles are waves. And waves, unlike particles, have no units of mass and energy. If you ask scientists, where are these waves? They say, in mathematical space, which is actually a cop-out, because where is mathematical space? Okay, so when we get to the heart of the matter, the universe is made out of nothing. Period. The second open question in science is, what's the nature of consciousness and where does it come from? Because we're conscious beings, we're aware beings, and it seems all of life is based on awareness, and there's no biological basis that we can find for consciousness. And so the few scientists who are really seriously thinking about this, they are coming to the conclusion that awareness of existence and existence might be the same thing. We know the universe exists, we know we exist, but why do we know? Because we are aware. So you can't separate the two. Existence and awareness are synonymous. So this leads to a very startling conclusion, and that is the universe is consciousness. The universe is awareness, and everything else is a modulation of that. Feelings, thoughts, emotions, but also what we experience as physical phenomena are the modulations of consciousness that we experience as sound, touch, sight, taste, and smell, and of course, our inner world. So there are three views right now that are competing. One is mind and body are two separate things. That's called duality. And that doesn't work anymore because if mind and body are two separate things, then how does one interact with the other that make this arm move up? Or how do I experience a three-dimensional world in space and time when all that's going to my brain are electrical impulses? So mind-body, the duality is out. That leaves only two other possibilities. Everything is physical, which seems to be out because the more we look at the physical world, the more it seems to be made of nothing. So there's only one other choice. We are non-physical beings that are manifesting as physical entities in an eternal continuum of space and time. Okay, so that's the theory. And that theory is called monistic idealism. And it's part of all the wisdom traditions in the East, from Buddha to the sages of the Upanishads. But it's also Plato. Plato was the first one to talk about what is called Platonic forms that become physical realities. In the last 5 years, we've been doing scientific investigations into people who practice what can only be called technologies for exploring consciousness. And these are as follows: meditation, self-reflection, self-awareness, transcendence, mindfulness, and intellectual exploration of what is the difference between what is perceptual and what is fundamental. So all these techniques are taken from the tradition of yoga, the word yoga means union with your own self. Yoga is the same as the English word yoke. When Jesus Christ speaks, my yoke is easy and my burden is light, at least I interpret that as getting in touch with your being, which is your higher self. So what we did about 3 years ago, I went to a Nobel laureate biologist, Elizabeth Blackburn, in University of California at San Francisco, and I said to her, she's got the Nobel Prize because she discovered an enzyme called telomerase. So telomerase is the enzyme that controls the length of your genome. At the tail of the genome is something called a telomere, which is like the button at the end of a shoelace. And as we grow older, the genome gets shorter and shorter. When it reaches a critical point of shortening, then the whole gene falls apart, and that's the basis of biological death. Even in the absence of a disease, we die. Okay? It's felt that even if you had no disease, you would probably live to about 120 years, after which there's programmed cellular death. So because the domain of awareness is said to be timeless, I said to Elizabeth, would you send a team of your scientists to look at people who are going through a one-week program in self-exploration through meditation primarily, but all the other things, all the other forms of meditation that I mentioned? And she said yes. And so what did we find? We found that in 4 days of a retreat where people were going inside and asking, who am I, what do I want, what's my purpose, experiencing gratitude for existence, and then using a mantra to transcend, and then feeling their body, exploring the internal space. You know, there are various aspects you can explore. The experience of sound, touch, sight, taste, smell, the sensations in your body, your mental space of thoughts, feelings, emotions, your relationship to the ecosystem, and finally transcendence. These are the techniques that have been used for spiritual exploration for thousands of years. And so what did we find? The level of the enzyme telomerase went up by 40%. This was shocking to everyone. So I then got in touch with scientists at Harvard, Rudy Tanzi, who's a collaborator of mine. We wrote Superbrain together. We're now writing Super Genes. So I called Rudy, I called scientists at Mount Sinai in New York, my friends at Scripps, digital medicine and digital cardiology, and some scientists in Duke University, and I'm at UCSD. I have a faculty position there. So we all 7 institutions got together and we measured not only telomerase, we measured the entire genome, and we found that every gene that is responsible for self-regulation actually got activated, and the genes that were responsible for inflammation and heart disease and Alzheimer's and autoimmune illnesses and many other types of cancer, the genes went down. They got down-regulated. So this was the first part of our study. So now we are measuring the activity of the microbiome, and we are doing something called metabolomics. So in a particular 24-hour cycle, your body makes over 100,000 molecules. So now we are measuring gene activity, telomerase, cell markers for inflammation, the activity of the microbiome, and all the 100,000 metabolites, and we have gigabytes and terabytes of data. And what we're seeing is that as you go inward to your core consciousness, which is not in time, which is timeless, you experience a complete shift in your body. So much so that we predict that many years of aging can be reversed. So how do we measure aging? Right now, there are cell ways to, cellular aging can be measured by telomerase, the length of telomeres, and also inflammatory markers. But there are other ways to measure aging, which include the amount of wrinkles you have, the blood pressure, bone density, body temperature regulation, sugar tolerance, hormone levels, skin thickness, fat content, cholesterol, HDL ratios, hormones. As I said, over 100,000 things to measure. And what we are seeing is biological transformation as a result of resurrecting your soul, basically. So now we have a new program. It's called SBTI. It stands for Self-Directed Biological Transformation, where we're looking at 5 activities which seem to be fundamental to well-being. The first is sleep. So, we spend 1/3 of our lives in sleep, and there has to be a purpose for sleep. And it seems the purpose of sleep is not only to eliminate the psychological toxins that we accumulate as a day goes by, but the purpose of sleep is also to detox the body physically. Meditation, it turns out, is number 2 in this process of renewal. Number 3 is exercise and movement. It's not even the intensity of exercise. And emotions is the 4th thing that we are looking at. If you're experiencing hostility, resentment, grievances, depression, anxiety, guilt, shame, that has a completely different biology. Food that is not manufactured, processed, refined, GMO'd, or contains petroleum, because all pesticides and insecticides are petroleum products. It's like putting Agent Orange into your microbiome and hoping that it will survive. So these are the 5 pillars of well-being. Now, in addition to this, we are able to digitally monitor heart activity and brain activity. And these digital monitors have become very sophisticated. So you can have a digital monitor which is about the size of a Band-Aid, you can put here or here. It'll pick up your heart and brain activity and it immediately transmit it, for now, to a supercomputer in scripts and instantly give you feedback. All these are measurable, and we find that for an individual, for a community, for a business, for a country, well-being is the number 1 predictor of the future, including traffic accidents, crime rate, and everything else that you can imagine. So this is a new era. This is the future of biology, a consciousness-based understanding of biology that looks at the individual, at families, at businesses, as communities, as nations. Today, the United States is about number 14 in the world in well-being, okay, which is pretty good actually, but Denmark is number 1 with almost 80% of people thriving. Thriving means they're doing amazingly well, 80%. Canada is, believe it or not, number 2 with over 70% of people thriving. In the United States, 58% of people are thriving. And then you have, places like Sub-Saharan Africa and the Middle East, particularly Somalia and Libya and Tunisia, where the well-being is so low that you can predict that there are going to be revolutions and violence and terrorism, all connected to the state of well-being of these individuals. So much so that at Gallup, where I am a senior consultant, we have spoken to the State Department, and our conversation is that the best way to get rid of your enemies is to improve their capacity of well-being and happiness. And if you can do that, that would be the way to create more social justice, economic justice, and all of that is connected with everything else that we are talking about these days: conflict, climate change, destruction of the ecosystem. It seems, from what we know, is that 30% of the microbiome has disappeared in affluent industrialized countries, like the US, for example. 30%, and this has been due to the inappropriate use of antibiotics and also the pesticides and petroleum products that we put in the ecosystem. And that, according to some microbiologists, is as big a threat to human extinction as climate change. So now that we know the importance of the microbiome, there's a lot of work going on to resurrect the microbiome from countries like Brazil, for example, where at least the Brazilian rainforest still has the entire spectrum of human microbes that we need to sustain this life, our life, and life on this planet. And what we are learning is that only 5% of disease-related gene mutations are fully penetrant. Only 5%, I'll repeat that, only 5% of disease-related gene mutations are fully penetrant, which means you can't stop them. And those are rare. So the kind of gene mutation that Angelina Jolie had for breast cancer. But most breast cancer gene mutations are not fully penetrant. They're influenced by lifestyle. This is true of Alzheimer's. This is true of many types of cancer, almost 90% of cancers. This is true of heart disease, Alzheimer's disease, you name it. So epigenetics means how do we regulate the activity of our genes? I mentioned the 5 pillars. And I mentioned now that once we have the metrics to do this, then you can create algorithms where we connect one intervention or one activity with other activities. And that's where technology comes in. Finally, what are the triggers that cause people to transform? In our experience, in our research, the triggers are first information, content, such as the information I provided you, but also more content, so all the research. And the second is training in personal growth technologies, internal technologies. The third is providing a physical space and in hospitals, which we are actually working with many hospitals right now. The fourth is creating a social network where you give people not only the content, but you connect them with each other so they can inspire each other to transform. The fifth is consumables, which include taking supplements, food, but also technology, all the various technologies. You know, I'm wearing a Fitbit, but you see Apple is coming out with a watch. And actually, there are so many technologies right now that can measure everything that's happening in your body. So you actually need to integrate these technologies, your brain waves, your heart waves, your immune system, your stress levels, your genomics. In fact, there's already something called a gene radar, where you can take a bit of saliva, put it on a microchip, and it reads out your entire genome. So we have the technology to measure everything in the body. Now it's time to integrate this and then to create the metrics for it. We have content, you have motivation and inspiration through social networks, you give people the metrics, and you create the technology for doing the metrics and giving feedback. And then you provide goods and services that help people transform. And we think that if we can do this effectively, we are creating a destination site, which we hope will be as big as Google, but just for well-being, and which will inspire people for personal transformation. And I believe that if we do that at a level of critical mass, we can hope for a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and happier world. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Deepak,